Hey everyone, welcome back to Input. And in this video, I am doing a voiceover because my original audio was lost, but this is a customization video. I figured I'd give this kind of thing a try. So what I'm doing here is taking the retail release of the Unite Warriors scatter shot, and I am taking the Superion styled head off and going to paint it up as a more Betatron, Computron style. So I already took the head off, but I decided to go ahead and put the head back together and kind of show you guys how to take it apart because the head's kind of put together really well. It's not glued or anything. So what you do is you take the back screw of the head off, which you already saw, and then you get a really you get a thin razor blade, and you put it in between the seams, and you just kind of pry it. Now you want to put the razor blade in there relatively deep so you don't scar the plastic when you pry, because the razor blade could slip and end up scarring the plastic, and you really don't want that. So as I'm doing right here, I'm kind of surprised by Hasbro painted this head. They chose to paint it like Superion's head, the same color and everything, so they could have used marine color to paint it, which I'm really surprised that they didn't. And so here I just set it off to the side, and I'm not too sure what I'm doing here. Oh, isopropyl alcohol, 91%. This is probably going to be your best friend in figure customization. They do make a 99%, which is used on electronics, which is still plastic safe, but this is 91, which anybody and everybody can pick up from Walgreens. That's why I decided to pick it or use it. So what I'm doing here, I'm just dunking the head pieces in, and I'm going to let them soak in the alcohol. And what that does is it strips the paint. And right here, I did a jump cut. This takes about, soaking in the alcohol probably takes about an hour or so, but every so often, periodically, you want to wipe the excess paint off, because the paint doesn't come off very well in the alcohol, but it does eat the paint, so you just wipe it away. Now what you don't see here off screen is there's about 7 Q-tips that are covered in this metallic black paint that Hasbro used. But in doing so, I did discover that underneath that black paint was a metallic gray primer that they used, which I did save on the face mask and the eyes section. Now I'll get into that, on why I did that here in a little bit. But what I'm doing here is I'm drying off the plastic with this Q-tip, and it's just soaking up all the excess alcohol and everything. And what I end up doing is, to get the creases and everything, I end up blowing into the plastic, and it's kind of and it just kind of gets all the excess alcohol and moisture and stuff out of the plastic. And that's what I'm doing right here with this first piece, and then I'll end up doing that with the face piece right there. And if the original audio wasn't lost, you'd be able to hear me blowing into the plastic and disturbing everybody, and probably have a volume warning on this video. So then I take the alcohol and I set it off to the side, and then I turn my light on because I remembered that my light wasn't on. Oops, sorry. It doesn't really affect anything. And right here, I think I'm getting my phone to show you guys my inspiration for what I'm trying to accomplish with this figure. I think I'm looking up the G1 Toy Computron, and yep, that's what I'm doing. So there's the G1 Toy of Computron, and there's a lot going on in just that neck and head section. And as you can see, the eyes are gold and the face is red, and the head itself is maroon, and the shoulder cannons are strafe shoulder cannons that you can put right there, which I thought was really cool. And this is called Chaotic Red. I don't remember the company that made it, but I just put a little bit of this Chaotic Red, and the Chaotic Red is a maroon color, and it's color matched really well. I actually took the Unite Warriors Scattershot gun into my local comic book store when I bought this paint and color matched it that way. And here I'm just grabbing the inside of the backside of the head, and you're going to do a thin layer of paint first. You always want to do, when you're brushing something on like this, you always want to do a thin layer and kind of thicken the layers up as you go. And this really only needs just 2, maybe 3 layers of paint. The reason why I didn't primer this is because with a gray primer or a black primer, the maroon would have came out darker than what was in the bottle. It would have been a darker maroon, which I didn't want. I wanted to color match this as much as I possibly could to the Unite Warriors hands and gun and Scattershot's guns and stuff, because I felt like that maroon was very reminiscent of what the character was, especially in my mind. And then looking at the G1 toy there, it does look very it does, this maroon color matches it pretty well, I think. So here I am on the thicker layers. I'm just kind of spreading it out a little thinner while I still have the opportunity and I still have the time to do so. And here I'm just going over a few spots that I missed, dabbing it into the creases and then brushing it out. And then I'm going to end up doing the same thing. And right here, I'm just trying to figure out how to set it down without really touching the paint or ruin the paint. And like I said, I was going to do the same thing with the face part as well. And what I'm doing here is I'm just going to put the screw back into the back of the head so I have something to hold on to that's not the face or the side of the head or anything like that. I didn't have really a way to do that with the back side of the head. Although a Q-tip in the intersection and you hold the Q-tip would do the job. So I'm, again, just painting the first layer. Now the front part of the head is a little bit more, I won't say complicated, but it's got more creases and more divots and whatnot. It's not as flat as the back side of the head. And what the screw allows me to do is to hold it, obviously, but it allows me to rotate it and spin it really in any direction that I want to, like I said, without having to actually touch the face or the faceplate or the head or anything like that and ruin the paint. I can, with holding the screw, I can paint wherever I want to. I don't have to hold the face mask and then paint the head and then worry about how I'm going to set it down later. So again, here I'm just doing the first layer of this maroon color. And it is a maroon. It comes off a little brown on camera, but that's what maroon is. It's a brownish red, but it does come off a little bit more brown than what it really is on camera. And I'm just doing, like I said, first light coat. And these brushes are just standard Hobby Lobby brushes that you can get for a couple of bucks. These aren't special model maker brushes or anything like that. I think like a 10-pack of these brushes are a couple bucks from Hobby Lobby. I think like $5 and get you like 10 of them or something. They're pretty cheap, but they're not bad brushes at all, especially the flatter ones. The rounder brushes in that set tend to be pretty bad, but these flatter brushes are the reason why I get these packs. And again, now what I'm doing, I'm just thinning out the paint in some of the areas where I feel like it's a little too thick. And that's all I'm doing right here. Just trying to thin it out. And what I end up doing in later on that I don't end up recording because I forget to record it, I end up painting the backside of both of these heads, the intersection, as well. As you can see, I'm trying to kind of doing it right there. And now I'm just trying to really kind of figure out how to set this one down and get a couple spots that I missed. And that's a little too thin right there. And then I set it down just like that. And the thing I like about this paint is that this paint dries pretty quickly. You're going to see a jump cut here in a second and see pretty fluid jump cut. It takes maybe about 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes for each layer to dry. And so now I'm moving on to the second layer. And I really wish, in hindsight, I would have put a Q-tip where my hands are to be able to hold the backside of the head a little better. but I'm doing the underside right here. And like I said, this is the second layer, and I only do 2 layers on the head. I don't do 3 because all I needed was 2. That's how good of a coverage this paint offers. And I'm just doing the creases and everything. And at some point I realized that I'm out of focus throughout this video because I'm not really looking through the viewfinder, because it's kind of hard to see what or not the viewfinder, excuse me, the screen, the back side of the screen of the camera, because it's a little hard to make out what I'm doing through the eye of the camera. So I'm looking around the camera, and that's why I get a little out of focus, or I pull away a little too far. And here I'm just doing the second layer on this side, and as you can see, the white is now completely gone. And it really, like I said, this paint offered a lot of great coverage, and just thickening it up in certain places where there's still a little bit of white showing through and everything. And that's all I'm doing on this head. And I'm going to end up doing the same thing on the other side, or on the face part of the head. And it's dry enough for me to touch when I set it down. That section had dried that quickly because I had laid it on thin enough. And then here I realized I was out of focus. I brought it back into focus, and then there's another jump cut. And then this is something I wish I didn't do, was hold it with the pliers. I figured the pliers would give me a little bit more maneuverability over my hands, but it doesn't. I wish I would have stuck using just my hands holding the screw and not the pliers, because I had to hold the pliers pretty tight though to hold that head. And here is Dragon Red, which is a very pure red, and it's from War Paints. This is my first time really using War Paints. They're on the cheaper side, and you don't get as much as the Warhammer paints. At least that's what it seemed like. And so they're a little bit cheaper, but they're roughly the same as far as quality goes. If you don't want to spend $6 on a little tube of Warhammer paint, you can get this kind. And what I'm doing here, I'm just painting the red where the face would be behind these, lack of a better term, sunglasses and this mouthpiece. And this red really pops. And I'm not being too careful with where the red paint goes, because that's the whole reason why I'm painting the face first, is that way I can be a little bit more generous, because that way I can just paint over where the red ends up on the face mask and on the sunglass area, visor area, I guess. And the red takes, again, 2 coats to do. Now, the reason why I didn't strip that primer, that Hasbro primer, is because it's a metallic, dark metallic gray primer. And that's how the black was able to have that metallic sheen to it. The primer was coming through just a little bit. And so I decided to keep that silver there, so when I applied the gold, it has that metallic effect to it. Now, gold will have a metallic effect no matter what, because it's gold. And so will silver. Metallic paints will always have that metallic sheen to it. But to help the sheen pop, I decided to add, or keep that primer to help that gold. And right here is the gold. And I don't remember the name of the gold, but it's a bit of a darker gold. But the trick with gold is if you lay it on thin enough, the shade is what comes through, not the color, if that makes sense. So if you have like a darker gold, if you do it light enough, oh, here we go, I'm showing it again. Greedy gold. So what I was saying is, if you put it down thin enough, the shade comes through more so than the color. And you can do that with up to about 3 layers of metallic colors before the color starts to show through versus the shade. So this takes, the front of the face mask should take about two coats, and the side takes about 2 coats each. Excuse me. And so what they do what I'm doing here is I laid the first layer on a little too thick, so I'm just kind of spreading it out and thinning it out just a little bit. And doing it on the side, and I'm painting on the face mask again. I don't know why I was so focused on the mouth plate as much as I was. But now I'm doing the face, that one other side. And as you can see, it's really starting to look like Computron. It's starting to match the colors and stuff. And like I said, what I wanted to do was to really show, or I wanted to keep that idea of Betatron, almost like Betatron can't talk, but he can compute. So I really wanted to keep the idea of Betatron and kind of add my own lore to it and everything. I really like the idea of Betatron. Like I said during that Computron review, I really like the idea. I just think Hasbro didn't really go forward enough with it. They didn't really bring it to fruition enough. And here I'm just painting up the visor and everything. Painting it gold. Gold! It's my Austin Powers impression. Terrible impression, I know. But, so, yeah, like I said, I just wanted to keep the idea of Betatron alive in this. And I really think it's starting to come out, and you're really starting to see. And then I'm adding a little bit more gold right there to the front. So now the thing is that you really want to be really careful. The reason why I do thinner layers with metallics versus the standard colors. Now you want to do thin layers no matter what, but I do thinner layers with the metallics because if it doesn't dry all the way when you do your second layer, you end up pulling that first layer down and you have this weird clump underneath the second layer, which isn't too terrible, especially if you're at this stage. You can always grab some alcohol and a Q-tip and wipe it off, but you have to wipe off that entire area. So for example, if I was to mess up the front part of the faceplate, I would wipe off that entire section of the faceplate and then redo it, since the two sides of the faceplate are different sides. And then that's the whole reason why I left the bottom part white, so I can set it down. And then I end up painting the bottom side a little later after everything dries. And then here's the third layer of the gold on the front. Now the third layer really starts to bring out the color, like I was saying earlier, versus the shade of gold. And it lightens it up. It's not as dark, but you're really going to want 3 layers on this to really help it out, to really drive home that it's gold. Or it's like that darker gold. It's like pre-gold, as the bottle called it. And here I'm just showing off essentially what the final product ended up looking like. And I do end up clear coating all this. And normally what I'll do with a clear coat, I know I'm jumping ahead, but what I'll do normally is I use a clear coat out of a can or an airbrush or something like that. I decided to get some paint on clear coat, and I'll talk about that here when we get to it. But what I'm doing here is, this was another jump cut, pretty smooth jump cut, but here I'm taking taking the screw out and fumble fingers dropping it. Luckily the paint didn't scratch or anything. And I'm putting the antenna on. And now the whole reason why I kept the antenna orange is because I thought it looked like Strafe's guns when you put them on the G1 figure. It kind of looked like the Strafe shoulder cannons sitting on Computron. So I really thought that'd be a really cool homage or throwback to that G1 figure. And here I'm just putting the head back onto the peg wrongly, and then I figure it out and I say, oh, okay, yeah, it goes on that way because I'm looking at it funny. And then I just put the back piece back on, and then I end up screwing it all together. And I'm being real gentle here with the head and the paint because there's no clear coat or anything on this yet. Then I was looking for the screw, like I couldn't see it right in front of me. And then I just simply put it all back together and tighten it up. And when I put the head on the peg, I left enough slack in order to have the head kind of slide together, so the screw is what forces the head back together. I didn't really put a whole lot of pressure on it because I didn't want to, like I said, I didn't want to damage the paint or anything like that. So, like I said, I'm just screwing this all back together. And what I love about this torso, this Combiner Wars torso, Silverbolt torso, that's what I was looking for, excuse me, the Silverbolt torso, is that it stands up on its own. So if you're doing any kind of customization work and you're trying to let it dry for whatever reason or whatnot, you can always just stand it up. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm putting the torso mode together. And I know I mistransformed it. I forgot to flip up the little chest piece, the Scattershot Silverbolt chest piece. And just spinning the legs around, or the arms, what become the upper thigh leg area in combined mode. And torso's all put together. And the reason why I did this is so I could clear coat it, because I didn't want to hold it while I was clear coating it. Painting it is different than clear coating it that way, I feel like. So, and here I'm just kind of showing off what it looks like with the new paint color and stuff on the head. And I really think it does bring out a, I was going to say Superion, but it really brings out that Computron look. And if you have your Technobots, it's a really cool throwback. And here I use this Model Master acrylic. Now, the one thing I did learn about this is that this goes on really thick. So be really careful if you guys decide to use this. This needs to be applied relatively thin, and if you're doing it thin, which is what you're supposed to be doing, you know, normally I just kind of wipe it off like that, but it goes on really thick, like I said. But if you're clear coating, you want to clear coat real gentle. You don't want to be too heavy with the brush, because you can end up pulling the paint off real quick. And so I just moved the antenna back to get into certain crevices and areas and stuff right there. And you want to be a little bit thinner with the clear coat than you were with the paint. And you can do multiple layers with the clear. Like I said, this is my first time using this brush on acrylic, or this brush on clear coat. And it just came on, just went on really thick. So at certain times, at certain points, I end up trying to fix it by thinning it out, like right here. Trying to thin it out, and me thinning it out worked really well. It's just I was running out of clear coat on the brush, and so right there, basically anywhere where I see is white, I try to thin it out as best I can, because again, I reiterate, it goes on really thick. It goes on thicker than expected. So I think this does, or I end up using this for 2 coats of clear, maybe 1, because of how thick it went on. There I'm just moving the antennae again, so I can get to back area of the head and everything. And like I said, you want to be really careful with how you brush this on. You don't want to have a heavy hand, or you do not want to have a heavy hand with that brush, because you'll end up stripping the paint right off, and then you're back to square one. You got to go back and paint again. And here I'm just painting up the sides, you know, and I keep trying to get it as thin as I can, but it's a good clear coat. Like I said, it just goes on thick. It goes on a lot thicker than the paint. It just really surprised me. And here I'm painting, or clearing up the clear coat, and just kind of cleaning it up and trying to clean it up and blocking you guys' view as best I can with my hand as I paint. So, and the dry time on this clear coat, because some of the areas were a little thicker, I didn't quite get to thin it out as best as or as good as I would want it to, as good as I would want it to be. It took about 45 minutes to get dried. And here I have him in combined mode with the Unite Warriors Technobots. And just to show you guys what he looks like as Betatron, I guess. And see, I even transformed him correctly with the stomach area. And so the antenna, like I said, is an homage to Strafe's guns, but Strafe's guns is up there on his shoulder anyway, because you can't put him on you can't aim him on the shoulder with this mold. And here I'm just showing how it looks front and back, and kind of pulling him down just a little bit to show him again front and back. And I really like how this came out. I really think it came out really cool. and the maroon matches really well. It matches the plastic. It doesn't match the paint that Takara used for the hands and feet, and I end up showing that right here because I really wish I would show the gun against the paint because it's just pure plastic. But as you can see, the paint's a lighter shade. The paint that Takara used, not the paint that I used, it's a lighter shade than the paint that I used. But like I said, the plastic is spot on perfect. So, and I'm just doing a comparison. Not too sure why I didn't compare the plastic. I decided to go with the paint, the painted limbs, or the painted hands, I should say. So my camera's kind of jumping around because my camera arm doesn't hold the weight that high very well. So I was just trying to show you guys what it looked like right there. I'll zoom back out a little bit. And I didn't have any lighting on the right side because that lamp broke. That'll be rectified here next video or so, but put the hand back on. And like I said, I really like how this came out, and I think the video's ending here pretty soon. I think the cut it out part's going to show up. So I really enjoyed, yep, there it is, cut it out. And I said, later guys, and then fool you guys, cut it out. Hope you guys enjoy this one. Later.